The following Friday, while we were having supper in the caravan, my father said, "If it's all right with you, Danny, I'll be going out again tomorrow night." "Will it be Hazell's Wood again?" "It'll always be Hazell's Wood. First, because that's where all the pheasants are, and second, because I don't like Mr. Hazell one little bit, and it's a pleasure to poach his birds." I must pause here to tell you something about Mr. Victor Hazell. He was a brewer of beer, and he owned a huge brewery. He was rich beyond words, and his property stretched for miles along either side of the valley. All the land around us belonged to him, everything on both sides of the road. Everything except the small patch of ground on which our filling station stood. That patch belonged to my father. Mr. Victor Hazell was a roaring snob, and he tried desperately to get in with what he believed were the right kind of people. He hunted with the hounds and gave shooting parties and wore fancy waistcoats. Every weekday he drove his enormous silver Rolls-Royce past our filling station on his way to the brewery. As he flashed by, we would sometimes catch a glimpse of the great glistening, beery face above the wheel, pink as a ham, all soft and inflamed from drinking too much beer. "No," my father said, "I do not like Mr. Victor Hazell one little bit. I haven't forgotten the way he spoke to you last year when he came in for a fill-up." I hadn't forgotten it either. Mr. Hazell had pulled up alongside the pumps. "Fill her up and look sharp about it." I was 8 years old at the time. He didn't get out of the car. He just handed me the key to the cap of the petrol tank, and as he did so, he barked out, "And keep your filthy little hands to yourself, do you understand?" I didn't understand at all, so I said, "What do you mean, sir?" There was a leather riding crop on the seat beside him. He picked it up and pointed it at me like a pistol. "If you make any dirty finger marks on my paintwork, I'll step right out of this car and give you a good hiding." My father was out at the workshop almost before Mr. Hazell had finished speaking. He strode up to the window of the car and placed his hands on the sill and leaned in. "I don't like you speaking to my son like that," he said. Mr. Hazell did not look at him. He sat quite still in the seat of his Rolls-Royce. "Next time you threaten someone with a good hiding, I suggest you pick on a person your own size," my father said. "Like me, for instance." Mr. Hazell did not move. "Now go away, please. We do not wish to serve you." He took the key from my hand and tossed it through the window. The Rolls-Royce drove away fast in a cloud of dust. The very next day, an inspector from the local Department of Health arrived and said he'd come to inspect our caravan. "What do you want to inspect our caravan for?" my father asked. "To see if it's a fit place for humans to live in. We don't allow people to live in dirty, broken-down shacks these days." My father showed him the inside of the caravan, which was spotlessly clean as always and as cosy as could be, and in the end the man had to admit there was nothing wrong with it. Soon after that, another inspector turned up and took a sample of petrol from one of our underground storage tanks. My father explained to me they were checking to see if we were mixing some of our second-grade petrol in with the first-grade stuff, which is an old dodge practiced by crooked filling station owners. Of course, we were not doing this. Hardly a week went by without some local official dropping in to check up on one thing or another, and there was little doubt, my father said, that the long and powerful arm of Mr. Hazell was reaching out and trying to run us off our land. So, all in all, you can see why it gave my father a certain pleasure to poach Mr. Victor Hazell's pheasants. That night, we put the raisins in to soak. The next day was poaching day, and don't think my father didn't know it. From the moment he got out of his bunk in the morning, the excitement began to build up inside him. This was a Saturday, so I was home from school, and we spent most of the day in the workshop, decarbonising the cylinders of Mr. Pratchett's Austin 7. "I want to be away at 6 o'clock, my father said. "Then I'll get to the wood exactly at twilight." "Why at twilight?" I asked. "Because, at twilight, everything inside the wood becomes veiled and shady. You can see to move around, but it's not easy for someone else to see you." "Why don't you wait till it gets really dark?" "You wouldn't catch anything if you did that. When night comes on, all the pheasants fly up into the trees to roost." "When will you be back?" "About 10 o'clock. 10:30 at the latest." "You're quite sure you don't mind being left alone?" "Quite sure. But you will be all right, won't you, Dad?" "Don't you worry about me," he said. putting his arm round my shoulders and giving me a hug.
"But you said there wasn't a man in your dad's village that didn't get a bit shut up by the keepers sooner or later."
"Ah, yes, I did say that, didn't I? But in those days there were lots more keepers up in the woods than there are now."
"How many are there now in Hazell's Wood?"
"Not too many.